Hello and welcome to this video. It's a review of Rush's 17th studio album, Vapor Trails, remixed. And that's coming right up. Prog, Dog, and Sharky are here with me. Thanks for joining us. This morning, I don't know how it happened, but I just ended up listening to the remix of Vapor Trails because I have never heard it actually. And I bought the original CD when it came out in 2002, when Rush sort of came back together, regathered after Neil Peart had his personal tragedy with his daughter and his wife passing away. I was on my knees and in tears almost when the new album came out. I was so grateful Rush is back at it, even though, oddly enough, the low ebb for me was the album just before this album. Prior to this, it was called Test for Echo. I didn't even buy it. I think I loaned it from the library at some point just to see if there's anything on it that I would really like. But it never really resonated too strongly with me, so I was so grateful that Rush had decided to get back together and do it again, get making music again, and they did tour. I didn't see them immediately for that tour anyways. It's been a long time since I listened to this album, so when I listened to it again this morning, the remix, I'm pretty sure I heard some of the differences. I did hear some additional backup vocals. They must have done that. They must have added little backup vocals here and there. And also the mix was completely normal, I guess you could say, because the 2002 version was so hot. And which I thought at the time was appropriate, and I wondered what was the fuss, why did they have to remix it? But listening to it this morning, I can see it was a good decision to make, to remix it, because I personally hate the loudness wars, because of, as you know, all it does is it minimizes subtleties. It basically makes everything loud and slamming all the time. Even quiet parts are slamming. I find that this album is very interesting, an engaging album. As far as looking at their entire discography, that's going to come into how I approach it, because you're comparing, obviously, with other albums they have. But in a way, it's sort of hard and not fair to do that, because a band is going to put out apples, it's going to put out oranges, it's going to put out grapes, like every album is not the same as other albums. It's not a regurgitation. It's something fresh and new. But you have to give the artists their space. I mean, that's how they got great in the first place, right? Alex Lifeson, let's talk about him on this album. I guess he didn't really want to have solos on this album, and yet with the remix, it sounded like they kind of amplified some little parts he did. It sounded kind of like he was doing a solo in a few of the songs. Which was different. I noticed that right away, which I enjoyed actually, because I miss his solos. But I can see that this album is very much more, well, if you're looking at a coloring book, and coloring neatly in the lines. Rush often does that. Their work is very fine and refined, but this album, they're going outside the outlines, They're coloring a little more broad, and that's good. I dig that totally. It's a long album too. It must be one of the longest studio albums. It's like a minute or an hour and 7 minutes. It flies by. When I listened to it this morning, it flew by. Apparently they were fully expecting to remove 2 or 3 songs instead of stick with the best, but they ended up liking all of them, and I totally agree. There's not a single song on this album that I would skip. I enjoyed every song. The only nitpick that I have is hearing Geddy Lee go in Vapor Trails. I'm not thrilled when he's doing that part. For some reason, it's just, I don't know. But that's maybe a personal point. I don't know. What do you guys agree? Other than that, I just love everything about this album, honestly. It's very textural. Lifeson he's being very colorful. There's no synthesizers, which is a little different for Rush, because synthesizers has been such a big part of their sound, really, for most of their career. This album has no keyboards at all, so it gives Lifeson license to just fill the songs with tones and textures, and I love that about it. The lyrics are all really good. I'm not a lyric head, I keep saying that, but there are certain lyrics that stick out to me that I really love that Neil Peart did. His drumming is a totally different approach too. His songwriting approach is different in this album. I find that a lot of their songs, his drums are part of the song. It's not like they're just in the background or just forming the base of it. they're really almost reaching up and becoming part of the song. There's key things that he would do in the drums that you would expect to hear, and it's really part of the track. It's, if you removed it, it would be like stripping the song half of the most important parts of it. And on this album, I don't feel like he did that approach so much. I feel more like on this album, it was a little bit more homogenous and blended in with the music, which is just a different approach. Yeah, like I said, some of the lyrics I liked, for example, from Out of the Cradle, it's not a race, it's a journey. That, to me, actually is kind of a retrospective point of view even about Rush themselves. You know, it's not a race, it's a journey. Endlessly rocking, of course that's talking about rocking the cradle, but endlessly rocking, I just hear that and I just think about Rush endlessly rocking, you know, rock and roll. So this album for me was a bit like a continuation of Counterparts or Counterpoints. Counterparts. I get that mixed up sometimes still. And even a little bit sort of a continuation of Test for Echo a little bit too. I just felt like that. But more Counterparts. It feels like that's more carrying forward than the immediately previous album. It feels like it's a little bit of a messy album in a way, in a good sense. It's just sort of a little less conscientious about, you know, dotting the I's and crossing the T's kind of in a way, just sort of more impressionistic, you know. It's a very consistent album. Oh, it's also notable about the bass. Geddy Lee's bass in this album. Again, it's kind of messy in a way sounding, and I like it. It's very sort of aggressive. Just sort of sloppy is definitely the wrong word. What's the word to say? Just sort of, I don't know what their point of view was when they made this album, if they would agree with me, but it sounds like they were just a little more carefree about it. It's a very raw album, which makes sense because Neil Peart was very raw, and the whole band would have, I mean, it affected everyone, right? I mean, it's a family affair, what happened, and they all had to go through that together. So it is very raw. The album does feel raw in that sense. So David Bottrell was the mixer, and he's a record producer and Canadian guy too. He's done Tool, he's done Coheed and Cambria, he's done lots of prog bands. Mastodon, I think he's just doing right now. It's a more recent project of his. And I wasn't really totally aware of the guy, but he's done some great work. So what I want to score this album? Well, the only thing that made me feel less of giving it a higher score was just that, you know, if I have all of their albums in front of me, which ones am I going to go to and listen to the most? And how often will I go to this album, the remix version? Well, not as often, as far as, even though I love it and I think it's great and it's well done, and but for some reason, maybe it's because the negative emotions that surround that album, knowing very well that how the album came to be, all the dark experiences that are behind this album and the struggles that they were going through personally, maybe that makes me like it less in a way, as far as something to go grab, as far as being uplifting or whatever. I'm trying to figure 7.5 or 8. It's pretty high score, because I mean, how many albums are there out there, and especially with this many songs on it, that you wouldn't want to skip a single song for me. So I'm going to have to say, you know, yeah, let's give it an 8 out of 10. So that's my score for the album, which is pretty high. I haven't done all of the Rush album reviews. I'm going to try to get through a few more album reviews because this is fun. To me, Rush are like family. And I just realized recently that even though my trinity, a holy trinity of favorite prog rock bands are Rush, Yes, and Genesis, and Yes, as far as spending time studying and listening to, probably Steve Howe is probably my main focus in my life. Despite all that, Steve Howe I don't feel like I'm his buddy, whereas Rush, I feel like I'm their buddy. I don't know if it's because we grew up in the same town, Neil Peart, St. Catharines, they grew up around Toronto area. I don't know what it is, but I feel like they're family. And that's why I would have to say Rush are number 1 for me, Yes number 2, Genesis number 3. So that was a bit of a revelation for me, because quite often I would have struggled to say, well, I think Yes is probably my favorite, because I spend the most time studying their music, listening to their music, learning their music. But it's mainly because, I don't know, it's Chris Squire, it's the whole band. Everyone in Yes are great. But Rush, our family. They're buddies. They are, through thick and thin, we stick together. That's how I feel about Rush. Yes, I don't feel so much a connection in that way, even though I've been a fan for decades. It's funny how that works. So that's my reaction, not my reaction, sorry, that's my review, and if there's more Rush albums you want me to review, let me know. For sure I'm going to do more reviews, because Rush is a significant band, so significant, can't pay them too little attention, I would say. Spiraling out steam, talk to you later, bye.